It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
Superstar approaching, superstar approaching.
Let's get your popcorn and get ready.
Come on, Julia.
Oh, no.
I will if you will.
You go, gal.
Yeah, boy.
We believe that the Jewish state has a right to exist, and Donald Trump and I will fight for that every single day when we're in the White House.
You want to give tax breaks to first-time home buyers.
Yes.
And people starting small businesses.
Correct.
How are you going to pay for that?
Hurricane Milton is a Category 5 storm. It is a serious storm. It is going to bring life-threatening storm surge to many communities.
Hello, I'm Weijia Jiang in Washington. Welcome to America Decides. Today marks 1 year since the deadliest massacre in Israel's history, when Hamas launched a surprise attack, killing 1,200 people and taking more than 250 hostages. 1 year later, the fighting has spread from Gaza to Iran and to Lebanon. Over the last 24 hours, Israeli airstrikes lit up the skyline in Beirut. The IDF says Hezbollah fired over 100 projectiles towards the country. And just this morning, Houthis in Yemen launched surface-to-surface missiles at Israel. And here at home, with about 4 weeks to go until Election Day, both presidential candidates and their surrogates are crisscrossing the country. Vice President Kamala Harris marked October 7th in Washington by planting a memorial tree, while former President Trump visited the grave of a rabbi in Queens, New York, that some consider the holiest Jewish site in North America. Harris is also on a media blitz. This week on the docket, Howard Stern, Stephen Colbert, Univision, the Call Her Daddy podcast, and 60 Minutes. That CBS News interview airs tonight. 60 Minutes also offered former President Trump an interview, but he backed out after accepting. His campaign later denied they had ever accepted the invitation. We want to start in the Middle East. Chris Livesay is in Tel Aviv following the latest.
Well, Weijia, today was a day of just somber reflection for the victims of those gruesome attacks 1 year ago on October 7th. It was remembered today throughout the country at a series of memorials. We were at the biggest one in Tel Aviv. It was organized by the families of the victims, of the survivors, of the hostages who are still being held in Hamas captivity. What was very deliberate was it had nothing to do with the government, which had its own commemorative event that was pre-taped and broadcast. This one instead was organized by the families, who are still quite upset with the government of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who they blame for allowing the events of October 7th to have happened to begin with because of the massive security breach that happened on Benjamin Netanyahu's watch, an intelligence breach, and also what they consider to be a leadership breach, something that just should never have happened if enough attention was being paid to Gaza, if there were enough IDF soldiers in the area. Instead, what Israel saw was the bloodiest day in the history of the Jewish people since the Holocaust. And that's something they still feel they're recovering from. You talk to virtually anybody in this country, and what they remember of that day, they'll tell you it was reopening that wound of the Holocaust. And it's something that, of course, they blame Hamas for, but they still haven't forgiven the government for allowing it to happen. Weijia?
Chris Livesay, thank you. Nancy Cordes joins us now from the White House. Nancy, Harris is marking this solemn day while pushing Israel on getting a hostage deal done. And I wonder if a Harris administration would have an Israel policy that is different from Biden's.
She certainly speaks about Israel and Gaza a little differently than President Biden does. But as of right now, her campaign has not laid out any major policy differences going forward between her and the current president of the United States. But she does make sure to mention the Palestinians and their plight almost any time she speaks about the Middle East and speaks about the U.S. ally that is Israel. For example, while she was planting that pomegranate tree on the grounds of the vice president's residence here in Washington, D.C. a short time ago, a pomegranate tree, by the way, symbolizes hope and good wishes in the Jewish faith. She said that the tree should not only serve to remind us that that peace is possible and is the ultimate goal, but also should remind everyone to seek the safety and security of the Palestinian people in Gaza.
And that tone was different even before she rose to the top of the ticket, which is certainly notable. In the 60 Minutes interview airing tonight, Harris spoke about the war in Gaza and Prime Minister Netanyahu. Take a listen.
Do we have a real close ally in Prime Minister Netanyahu?
I think, with all due respect, the better question is, do we have an important alliance between the American people and the Israeli people? And the answer to that question is yes.
So, Nancy, she sidestepped the question altogether. What do you make of her doing that?
Well, both she and President Biden, Weija, as you know, have from time to time been quite critical of Prime Minister Netanyahu, but they seem to like to choose their moments. And that certainly was one of those occasions. Obviously, by not wholeheartedly embracing him, by not saying, yes, he's an incredible and close ally, obviously her silence is speaking volumes. But she chose, at least in that instance, not to go a step further and criticize him, but instead to say that the U.S. and Israel writ large are important and longtime allies. The president and the vice president know that this is a relationship with Netanyahu that they need to preserve if they want to have influence on him going forward. And so there is this delicate dance that takes place where they sometimes feel that they can openly critique him, his leadership, his willingness or unwillingness to secure a ceasefire, and sometimes when they hold their tongue.
Nancy, you're right. We have watched both of them do this many times. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Well, you can catch the full interview with Vice President Harris tonight on 60 Minutes. It airs on CBS at 8 p.m. Eastern, and it will stream on Paramount+. Another dangerous hurricane is set to slam into Florida. Milton is gathering strength in the Gulf of Mexico. Our Christian Benavides is tracking the storm.
But time is going to start running out very, very soon.
A message of urgency from Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, warning residents to prepare for Hurricane Milton, including removing debris left from Hurricane Helene.
We need as much of this debris picked up as possible. This creates a safety hazard, and it also will increase the damage that Milton could do with flying debris.
Ben Lando lost his truck in Helene, but hopes his business can survive another punch.
It was coming from here, there, hitting together. I was like, that's missiles, even though I have shutters on every window.
Officials along the Gulf Coast say the hurricane-force winds will also keep first responders from helping those who ignore evacuation orders.
EMS won't be there, fire department won't be there, police department won't be there, so take heed to the warnings.
Storm surge could reach as high as 12 feet in parts of the Tampa Bay area. Another problem with debris clogging up storm drains, making flooding even worse.
We're going to board up, bag up, and leave.
Residents are lining up for miles to fill sandbags and their gas tanks.
You know, everybody's now starting to start filling up, but yeah, things are getting a bit hectic.
It's an exhausting effort that's becoming too frequent for some.
I mean, I have to admit, there was a moment where I said, how many more times am I going to live through this? I think every islander did.
Milton would be the first major hurricane to make direct landfall in the Tampa Bay area since 1921. Christian Benavides, CBS News, St. Petersburg.
The families of those held hostage by Hamas gather to call for their loved ones' return. We will speak with the father of one of those taken on October 7th. You're streaming America Decides.
These are the stories
1, 2, 3, go!
of we the people.
We're trying to generate our own hope.
It's a huge deal.
I'm enabling them to feel valued.
Eye on America, weeknights on the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I use sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off. That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good. Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail.
What do you say to those in your party? Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024? Let us help you decide.
America Decides. Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
Exclusively on CBS News 24/7, the streaming home of CBS News.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
Welcome back. For families whose loved ones are still being held hostage by Hamas, the last year has been one long nightmare. Currently, around 100 hostages remain in Gaza. Several of them are Americans. One of them is Sagi Dekelhen. He is a 36-year-old father of 3. 1 year ago, he helped to warn neighbors of the attack before joining local security to push back against Hamas. Let's bring in Sagi's father, Jonathan Dekelhen. Thank you so much for being here today. I can only imagine what the last year has been like for you. So tell me what marking October 7th means to you today and what your message is to the world.
Well, first, thank you for having me and helping us to keep the issue in front and center in the media and public awareness. For us, time stopped. Normal time stopped 1 year ago on October 7th, 2023. And it will really only begin again when all 101 of the hostages are released. Of those 101, 29 are from my kibbutz, from my small cooperative farming community on the border with Gaza. 29 remain. Of them, 9 we have confirmed were murdered by Hamas. We don't know the fate of the other 20, including my son. I think it's important that this issue not get lost, these 101 Israeli hostages, in the news cycle here in the States or anywhere else, amid all of the other issues that are out there, including the escalation of conflict in the Middle East, with now Israel facing conflicts in Lebanon, with Iran, with the Houthis in the West Bank. Because at the end of the day, the only way to unlock this deadly spiral and to somehow or another diffuse it is by reaching an agreement with Hamas, the devil, but the devil that holds our loved ones, reaching an agreement with Hamas to get the hostages home and create a ceasefire. That will allow the temperature to cool in the region and to, we hope, bring some reason back to our area of the world.
And what is the latest information you are getting from Israel and from the U.S. about where those efforts stand? I know there have been multiple times when it seemed like there was going to be an agreement that ultimately fell apart.
Well, unfortunately, for several weeks now, things have been at a standstill in the negotiation process. Depending on who you ask, you would hear that simply Hamas is not willing to negotiate in good faith. The U.S., together with the other intermediaries, Qatar and Egypt, and perhaps Turkey on the side, put forward a bridge agreement that was agreed upon by Israel, and Hamas simply refused several weeks ago. And that, I think, took the wind out of the sails of the intermediaries, and I think there's now a reevaluation of what approach to take to get Hamas to yes. The dilemma, of course, is that every day, every hour, that the hostages who still might be alive will be able to survive, and that we would be able to recover the bodies of those who have already been murdered. The clock has been ticking for some time, and the only hostages that Israel's been able to recover in recent months are those who have already been murdered.
You mentioned all of the other things happening right now in the region. Prime Minister Netanyahu has received some criticism for not putting enough focus on reaching a deal. Is there more that he could be doing, in your view?
Well, it's, in full disclosure, I've been one of his bigger critics since the start of this horrible year. Most of Israeli society, for months and months now, has been out in the streets protesting against the government. That most Israelis believe has not done enough, has not prioritized the lives of the hostages within its wider war aims. That's an ongoing conflict between the government and hundreds of thousands, millions actually in the aggregate of Israelis who have been protesting in huge numbers. It's clear that Prime Minister Netanyahu and his ministers, lip service aside, are not prioritizing the hostages and have, over the months, put up obstacles to the negotiation process by introducing new terms, new items that were not there before, and claiming that these are, immovable objects in the negotiation that simply weren't there before. But right now, the place that we're at is the weight is on Hamas to agree to something, and they seem completely unwilling to do that.
And you are obviously keeping this effort going. You're speaking out. Can you talk to me about, on a personal level, what you are doing to make sure Sagi's children, know everything that you want them to, think about, even though their father is not with them?
Well, Sagi has 3 little girls, one of whom he's never met. She was born 2 months after the massacre. Her mom and 2 sisters, at the time 2 and 6 years old, miraculously survived the massacre on our kibbutz. We really can't hide the truth from them because they experienced on October 7th what it is to be in the midst of a barbarous massacre of civilians perpetrated by Hamas. They heard it, they smelled it, they saw it happening all around them. They are aware that now the 3 and 7-year-old are aware that their father is a hostage in Gaza. They know that we are doing our best to get him home, but most of their questions we don't have answers to. when is he going to come back? Is he okay? And that rips one's heart out every time anew when those questions come up.
And I'm so sorry again, and we will continue to cover this story and try to get the answers to so many of those questions. But thank you for your time, for being so gracious. And we have Sigi in our thoughts always.
Thank you so much.
We had a lot of debris left from Hurricane Helene on Florida's Gulf Coast. That creates a huge hazard if you have a major hurricane hit in that area this week.
As cleanup continues in Florida from Hurricane Helene, the state gets ready for the life-threatening Category 5 Hurricane Milton. But how will those impacted pay for the damage? We're looking at the potential for government funds next.
On Face the Nation, we try to have an informed conversation about the essential issues of the day. The way to learn is to listen to the answers and to ask follow-up questions.
Why did you miss the moment?
I'm not sure why they missed the moment.
Listening to how someone explains themselves is so key to understanding their perspective. And that's why the face-to-face ones we have on Face the Nation are so important.
On America, weeknights on the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell.
This case,
it's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 hours, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Let's do it! Let's go! Let's do this! I can see clearly now that the rain is gone. Superstar approaching, superstar approaching.
Just get your popcorn and get ready.
Come on, Julia. Oh, no. I will if you will. You go, gal.
Yeah, boy! Yeah! Dollar Jill.
If you can't get into the market, it's okay. Renting is fine.
Box, oh, it's bad. Screw cap, oh, it's bad. It's not true.
We are making a wonderful lemony chicken.
Ooh, it's hot.
That's good.
I wonder what Serena's doing. I wonder how Serena is feeling.
That's a really good question. No one's asked me that yet.
You're 70 years old? 70, yeah.
I'm 21.
We'll see you 7 o'clock sharp.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you.
Big news coming out of the NFL. A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
With highlights.
What a finish at the final round of play.
And in-depth analysis.
Can they three-peat? Tony Romo joins the conversation.
What can you say about this game?
When you need your sports in a snap,
we're bringing you that breaking news right here on HQ.
Find it on CBS Sports HQ. Streaming free anywhere you are.
The CBS News original 60 Minutes opens its archives.
Pretty loose for a Friday night.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not my first show.
With moments you haven't heard before.
It's almost more fun that way when you have something to prove.
Listen to 60 Minutes, a second look, wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to America Decides. With the Southeast still recovering from Hurricane Helene, President Biden has called on Congress to fund a small business disaster loan program. But lawmakers are on recess until after the election. Scott McFarland joins us now. Scott, what is the state right now of disaster funding?
This is an emerging crisis with Milton approaching the U.S. There's about $1.6 billion remaining in the Small Business Administration's disaster loan program. Sounds like a lot of money. It's only going to get them through the end of this month. And Congress isn't set to come back till mid-November. So there's a problem there immediately. What's more, our latest CBS News reporting shows because of Hurricane Helene, there have been 3,000 requests a day for insurance fund loans.
Wow.
And that is depleting the system quickly. One of the issues here is Congress did not prepare for this when they passed the bill to keep the government open back in September. They did not put all this extra money in, anticipating a need for FEMA and anticipating a need for the Small Business Administration. They had been caught flat-footed on this. So there are these urgent requests from the White House and from some of the congressional delegation from the Southeast to bring Congress back, get something passed, get emergency money so none of these funds runs dry. That is a heavy lift in an election year to get Congress to do anything in unison. It's going to be a problem over the next few days.
Well, given the urgency, given the fact that President Biden has said, look, funding cannot wait, and to your point, the White House just today stressed the urgency again, could they come back? What's going to get them here?
Something's going to have to give because the money's going to run out before Congress comes back. And with Milton hitting and potentially future storms, there's going to be a need for that money. So a few possibilities here, Ouija. First of all, they can get something passed with only a few members of Congress showing up. They did that after Hurricane Katrina in 2005. It's possible they could do that. But you've got some conflicting interests here. You have people who don't believe in the way that Congress funds these things among members of Congress, any one of whom could come here, object, and throw the train off the tracks. What's more, I spoke with leadership in the House and Senate today. House leadership says there should be enough money until we get back, and it's hard to know how much we're going to need. We can't just flatly throw money out. And the Senate leadership says we need some better estimates, too, before we move forward here. That's what's going to be an inflection point over the next few days, the next couple of weeks. Something has to give.
Well, former President Trump is also talking about FEMA funds. He is claiming that money is going to migrants, which there is a tranche of FEMA money that went towards migrants, but they are not getting the disaster relief funds. Correct me if I'm wrong. And I wonder what FEMA is saying about his claims.
Now, FEMA is trying to push back on the disinformation that's being sown about their response and about different sets of money going for different things.
Right.
We've not heard from the Southeast congressional delegations of either party that there is a shortcoming in the funding for disaster relief. There's always going to be a call to get things moving quicker, more efficiently. That's FEMA after every major storm. But we haven't heard those things spread by congressional leaders, too.
Thank you so much, Scott McFarlane. Always fact-checking. Let the media blitz begin as Vice President Kamala Harris aims to get her message out. From Howard Stern to 60 Minutes, our political panel will weigh in on what she hopes to achieve. You are streaming America Decides.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail. What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024? Let us help you decide.
America Decides on CBS News 24/7.
Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7.
that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable.
The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels.
100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to America Decides. Former President Donald Trump is commemorating 1 year since the October 7th attacks with events in New York and Florida. Caitlin Huey-Burns joins us now from Doral, Florida. Caitlin, it's great to see you. So in recent weeks, we've seen Trump with a direct message to Jewish voters. What do you think he's trying to say with how he's commemorating the attacks today?
Hey, Weijia, good to be with you. Well, he is making a concerted effort, has been, to court Jewish voters. Earlier today, he was in New York, where he visited a holy site for Orthodox Jews. Tonight, he's hosting a ceremony, a gathering at his property in Doral, Florida. If you can see behind me, there are memorials to those who were murdered on October 7th, so commemorating that as well. But his approach has been notable. On one hand, he has made an aggressive pitch to Jewish voters, but in the same way, he has also offered condescending and derogatory remarks at times, saying that, you know, I have done so much for the Jewish people. If they vote for Democrats, there is something wrong with them, essentially, is what he has been saying. So a lot of controversial remarks he's been making at the same time he's trying to court this group.
And Caitlin, you were at Trump's return to Butler rally this weekend, where he criticized Democrats and even brought Elon Musk onto the stage. Let's take a listen to what he said then.
Those who want to stop us from achieving this future have slandered me, impeached me, indicted me, tried to throw me off the ballot, and who knows, maybe even tried to kill me.
Make sure they actually do vote. If they don't, this will be the last election. That's my prediction.
So, Caitlin, when I hear the first half of this quote, it's really nothing new. We've heard it for several years now, but he does seem to go one step further, accusing, Democrats of trying to kill him, as an example. Why do you think he's going there? Why do you think, Trump believes that will resonate with voters?
Yeah, Weijia, it's really interesting to consider, of course, offering that without any evidence, of course, but mentioning that on stage when he was returning to Butler. There is a sense among Republicans and those who are supporting Donald Trump that the assassination attempt, the first one, has kind of receded from public view or the public consciousness. And then, of course, there was a second attempt here in Florida. And there was a period of time after the Butler first assassination attempt where there was, it appeared to be kind of a national sympathy for him and what he went through. He mentioned just days later, while he was standing on stage with the RNC, that he will describe what happened that day and then never speak of it again. But having covered all of his rallies since that time, he does bring that up at nearly every rally. But on Saturday, it was notable because he is accusing his rivals of trying to take him down. And what's notable, too, is that over the course of these rallies, the former president has been conditioning his voters to question already the election results. They are trying to use these rallies to try to register voters. We heard that a lot on Saturday when we were in Butler, to try to get people to turn out and vote early. At the same time, the former president is kind of denigrating the early voting process, offering criticisms of it, sowing distrust among the election system, and kind of laying the groundwork there as well. But kind of taken all together, he has, essentially tried to thread this needle of those who are opposed to him are out to get him, and setting up this kind of system of injustice towards him. And that has been something that has really riled up his supporters and something to, keep an eye on heading into and after the election.
Caitlin Huey-Burns, thank you so much. We have seen both candidates in this presidential campaign go beyond the traditional airwaves to reach voters. That includes Vice President Harris's interview with the Call Her Daddy podcast. Take a listen.
He who, when he was president, hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And they did just as he intended.
Let's bring in our political panel, Molly Ball and Robert Costa. Molly is a senior political correspondent at the Wall Street Journal, and Robert is CBS News' chief election and campaign correspondent. Great to see you both. I want to get to Call Her Daddy, but I want to pick up where we left off with Caitlin first, since you both cover the Trump campaign so closely. What did you think about his remarks in Butler and the fact that he brought Elon Musk on stage with him to also talk to the audience?
I think it really symbolizes the way that Trump has expanded his coalition in some unexpected ways in this election. In the past, Elon Musk has been a Democrat. He's someone who quit an advisory role that he had with the Trump administration very early on because of disagreements about climate policy. Now he is all in. He owns one of the most important social media platforms for disseminating political news, and he is very overtly and clearly trying to use that to help Trump get elected. And I think it just shows that for as many people as Trump may have alienated or driven away with the controversial things that he said, he also has a substantial tranche of new supporters in this election who have come to him for various idiosyncratic reasons. But he has built this interesting coalition, notably into some of those parts of the Silicon Valley sort of intelligentsia, as symbolized by an Elon Musk, and in other areas as well that have really sort of changed the coalition structure for this election.
Yes, he has brought in a ton of money from Silicon Valley. But I wonder, Robert, what you make of sort of the darker tone that we heard, the accusations about what Democrats are trying to do to him, which is not necessarily new, but it does feel like a new step in the rhetoric.
Well, it's not exactly a new step in the sense that really for a decade now, since he entered the political arena, former President Donald Trump has had this kind of message about America. You think back to his inauguration speech, American Carnage. Steve Bannon infamously or famously said, depending on who you ask, that Trump wanted to turn around in his inaugural speech and wave and wag his finger at those seated on the dais, those members of Congress. He has always framed himself as anti-establishment. That's often come across with dark rhetoric that casts the establishment, those in elected power, Republicans and Democrats alike, as nefarious, villainous. It goes back to Trump's theatrical sense of politics and how he doesn't see things in a red-blue binary, but more in this kind of television producer mentality of he's really going to stir up the drama. So to hear this kind of rhetoric is par for the course with Trump. The challenge for Trump is, and you mentioned Silicon Valley, such a great point, he's brought in some favorites to his campaign from Silicon Valley, like Robert F. Kennedy Jr., of course, not of Silicon Valley, but was kind of a darling of certain figures in the tech community. Those who are close to Trump have often told me he would likely lose this election if Trump was associated with the past. Trump equals the past, litigation, politically speaking, over the 2020 election. But if Trump could equal change, if he could be seen as the change candidate, the anti-establishment candidate, then he would have a real shot at winning this race. And you always see that tension even now. Is Trump going to be pulled into talking about 2020, or can he talk about the present and really cast himself as different than Vice President Harris and the current administration? And that's really going to be the challenge for the Trump campaign moving forward. Can he close now by being change, or will he get pulled into the vortex of the past?
And the Trump camp has also said that Harris is not an agent of change, that she is just an extension of Biden. And that's one reason they claim why she doesn't do interviews. But now she's on this media blitz. Do you think this is a response to their criticism? And is it going to move the needle at all? We're seeing her, everywhere.
Well, and it's interesting how they're targeting her appearances. You see them very precisely trying to target the type of groups that she needs to reach to win this election, notably going over the heads of much of the mainstream media, with the exception of, a well-regarded, well-watched show like 60 Minutes, of course. But here we are on a streaming platform, right? More and more people are not, unfortunately for me, getting their news from a newspaper on their doorstep every morning. or from some of the more traditional media. And so she's finding ways to reach Gen Z women in the case of something like the Call Her Daddy podcast, young men in the case of some of the other podcasts she's sought out, and a broad general audience that may not be focused on the news, but is watching entertainment media like the late night programs. So you see, and I don't think this is her taking the bait from the Trump campaign, because her campaign has been very intentional and disciplined about not taking Trump's bait throughout this campaign. But they do see the imperative for her to get in front of as many voters as she can, to get attention from as many voters as she can, particularly voters who don't care about politics, because those are the final get out the vote targets as Election Day nears.
And Robert, Call Her Daddy is one of the most popular podcasts in the country. So it's not just about the crowd size, right? Who is she trying to connect with when you look at that particular audience?
Well, based on my reporting about this podcast, it's notable that she's going on something that is, at first blush for some people, appealing to women and maybe has a progressive ilk. But the history of this podcast and its host, Alex Cooper, are a little bit more complicated. They're not as straightforward as just being some kind of left-wing podcast that's popular with women nationwide. It was originally a production of Barstool Sports, which is founded by Dave Portnoy, who has more libertarian-leaning politics. She then became an entrepreneur, broke with her original host, and now is kind of an entrepreneur on her own with this very high-valued podcast. And it's never had a political tilt per se. So for Vice President Harris to go on there, it's not like she's checking a box with a progressive constituency. She's reaching out to women. There are also men who listen to this podcast, from what I can tell. And it's non-political. And what she's doing, and I think she recognizes this when I talk to her advisors, that so many young people today, if they went to high school or college under the Trump administration, they do not see Trump oftentimes as abnormal on the American political scene. And she can't maybe correct that point of view, but she needs to counter it by making these such appearances so that young people don't look back at Trump with fondness and say, my parents maybe had more money, or it was a more positive experience for me. Because so many people who are, let's say, above 30 see Trump as definitely something that's an aberration in American political history, but the younger people do not. And so she really, I think, is trying to get that soft, non-political voter to give her a fair hearing.
And then she'll do a more traditional show tonight on 60 Minutes. Thank you for the shout out, Molly. And thank you so much for being here, Molly Ball and Robert Costa. Well, right now, the election may be the last thing on the minds of North Carolina voters affected by Hurricane Helene. But with the state up for grabs, election officials meet to work out a plan to help get people to the polls. We'll have more next on America Decides.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy. And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun. But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking.
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
Innovative and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For a 1-hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Don't miss true crime anytime you want, anywhere you go. With the 48 Hours podcast. Real crimes, real lives, real justice.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Listen to 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Nations are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's going to be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today. I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm going to remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was going to be born, he was only going to live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift. Stream now on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
A CBS News investigation. People looking for love, finding their life savings gone.
This could happen to anybody.
And sometimes losing their lives. Anything for love. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
With less than 1 month to go until Election Day, the North Carolina State Board of Elections unanimously passed emergency measures today aimed at helping both election officials and voters impacted by Hurricane Helene. These measures will apply to 13 counties in the Tar Heel State, where the board says infrastructure, accessibility to voting sites, and postal services remain severely disrupted. Major Garrett joins us now. He spoke with the head of the North Carolina State Board of Elections earlier today. Major, I imagine they are very, very busy.
Yes, look, there's a hierarchy of needs in Western North Carolina right now. Food, water, shelter, power, cell service, all of them rank higher than accessibility to a mail-in ballot and understanding what your location is to vote early and in person. We understand that. But there's still an election, and there are hundreds of thousands of voters who participated in the 2020 election from these 13 counties who have to have a plan when they can refocus on who they want to vote for and how they can submit that ballot. And today, the 5-member board voted unanimously to create some changes. And I talked to the leader of that board, Karen Bell, for her perspective on the changes made and how they're planning to assist those voters who want to participate even as they come out of this horrific storm. Let's listen. Karen, what did the State Elections Board decide today, and what adaptations will be undertaken to make sure those voters who live in 13 counties most directly affected by Helene can participate in this election?
So today, the state board took action with their emergency authority to give really flexibility to these 13 most affected counties so that they can change or add or modify their early voting sites. Early voting in North Carolina begins next Thursday, October the 17th, and runs through November the 2nd. So this gives them flexibility if they need to change up those sites. They get similar provisions to be able to relocate election day sites or merge them, whatever can best accommodate the facilities that they have access to, the workers that they have access to, and still be able to get voting to the people. That's really key because so many of these Western North Carolinians have been cut off from their county seats and so forth. It gives them flexibility in terms of the precinct officials. We can now allow other registered North Carolinians to come in and work in those counties. It also allows for some changes in how voters can get their absentee by mail ballots back. In any county in North Carolina, early voting sites can accept absentee by mail ballots, but now in these 13 affected counties, their election day sites can do so. And similar to try to be of assistance to the voters, we can have those absentee by mail ballots delivered to other county boards of elections not affected. That can be delivered to the voter can take it to those county board of elections, or they can take it, a near relative can deliver it as well.
These adaptations and this flexibility is in deference to, and I want you to describe for my audience, the challenges that these 13 counties are facing, not just with voting, but day-to-day existence.
Last Monday, 1 week ago, we did not even have all of our offices open. 14 of them were not. And I'm so pleased to say that today, all county election offices are open in North Carolina to the public. And that's just remarkable because it's happening at a time when many of these officials, these county election officials, have lost their own property. They've been displaced. Many of these 13 most severely affected counties still do not have water and sewer. They are limited in power at their homes. They have it at their county board offices. They have electricity. They have internet and cell service at their county board offices, but they may not have that in their homes. We have workers who can't come in because their driveways are washed out. They may have a bridge over a creek and they're having to rebuild that in order to come back to work. So just to know the level of dedication that these people have is just, it's about their spirit. They are that committed to ensuring that every eligible North Carolinian is able to cast their ballot.
There is an assumption, and I want to make sure people understand what we're talking about here, that all of these counties are Trump counties. Most of them are. I did a quick check of the 2020 turnout. So there are 13 counties, as you mentioned. President Biden carried 2 of them. President Trump carried the other 11. If you take the 11 counties that former President Trump carried in 2020, that comes to roughly about 239,000 votes across all those 11 counties, not just for President Trump, but across all the votes, and about 190,000 in the 2 counties that Biden carried. So there are lots of voters in these 13 counties, and they're distributed not exactly equally, but there's Biden voters and Trump voters there, and you want to serve all of them.
That is exactly right. The actions today were unanimous by bipartisan state board of elections. What we've asked for in a lot of the actions that the counties will take to serve these voters is a bipartisan majority to make these changes and accommodations. And so, in our everyday capacity, our job, our commitment, and our oath is to ensure voting for every eligible voter. We don't care about the political stripes. We care about people getting out to vote. And in reality, in North Carolina, we actually have more unaffiliated voters than we do of either major political party. So we don't know what North Carolinians are going to do when they go to that ballot box. But what we do know is that we want them to be able to have that option. And so we're taking every measure we can to ensure that in all of these counties that are so heavily affected, that those voters are going to be able to vote.
Karen Bell also told me this, Ouija, that people who were not necessarily planning to participate as poll workers or election administrators are volunteering now because they've heard that people who were going to do those can't get there, can't do it. She said people are throwing themselves into this task at the last minute just to make sure people can vote, even while people have so many other needs.
It's always remarkable in times like this to see Americans come together for each other. Thank you so much, Major.
Sure.
The Supreme Court is back in session. We've got details on the abortion case they've already declined to hear and what has made the docket for the fall session. You're streaming America Decides.
These are the stories
1, 2, 3, go!
of we, the people.
We're trying to generate our own hope.
It's a huge deal.
I'm enabling them to feel valued.
Eye on America, weeknights on the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off. That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good. Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail. What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024? Let us help you decide.
America Decides. Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
Exclusively on CBS News 24/7, the streaming home of CBS News.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
Supreme Court justices rejected a number of high-profile appeals today as they returned to the bench following their summer recess. Among the appeals, a request from the Biden administration to throw out a lower court ruling that said hospitals in Texas cannot be required to provide abortions if they would break state law. In Texas, abortion is banned except when the life of the mother is at risk. CBS News Supreme Court and legal producer Catherine Cole joins me now. Catherine, it's great to see you.
Thank you.
Talk to us more about this case and why it's significant that the Supreme Court decided not to rule on it.
Yeah, well, it's day one of the new Supreme Court term, big day, and as expected, you're right, first thing they did was tell us the cases they won't be hearing, and this is the biggest one of them. So what's going on here is there is a Texas law that restricts abortion, but has exceptions for the life of the mother, or in fact, when there is a substantial threat to her health. The Biden administration was worried that this violated a federal law that requires doctors to give you stabilizing care whenever you are in an emergency room. But the lower court said, look, that federal law, that doesn't provide specifics. And also the Texas law has these exceptions. And so we don't think these two laws are in conflict. And then today what the Supreme Court did was say, we're not getting involved. So takeaway here, nothing's going to change. The Texas law stands. But what you should not conclude is that the court is not going to wade into controversy this year. There's a number of big cases coming up.
And tell us about some of those cases. What are they going to?
Yeah, well, fireworks start as soon as tomorrow. There is a case tomorrow involving ghost guns, which are these kind of do-it-yourself gun parts kits. You order them online. You can put together a gun in your garage. And the ATF in 2022 said, basically, we're going to regulate these parts as though they are firearms already. They're firearms themselves. Right. And then that way, the government can require things like serial numbers, background checks, other regulations that make it easier for law enforcement to do its job. The advocates for these gun makers will argue that's Congress's job. And so the court is going to have to decide, can the ATF do this? But the biggest case, that's tomorrow, the biggest case is coming later, and that case involves the provision of puberty blockers, hormone therapies, and other medications for children with gender dysphoria. This comes out of a law out of Tennessee, which said these treatments, they're untested, they might be harmful. We're not going to allow them in Tennessee. A number of states have laws like that in place. But then a number of other states say this kind of treatment is protected as life-saving care. And so the court is going to have to decide, is Tennessee right? That's coming up later this year.
Well, both of those cases, I can already see why they will be fiery. The Supreme Court could also be asked to weigh in on cases related to the 2024 election. What could they hear, and could there be a potential impact on I guess that's tough to say.
No, yeah. Boy, I think the court would love to stay out of the 2024 election if it could. Whether it will be able to remains to be seen. Already in August, they had to get involved in a proof of citizenship and voter registration challenge out of Arizona. And we've seen just an explosion in litigation involving the election this cycle: voter roll maintenance cases, mail-in ballot cases, voter registration cases. So it's possible one of them percolates up. But one thing I would say is that we're now 29 days out from the election, and all courts, from the Supreme Court right on down, are going to be really reluctant to change the rules of play this late in the game. So I would expect, knock on wood, maybe a quiet couple of weeks, because no court is going to want to intervene unless the unforeseen happens. And then after that, who knows?
Exactly. Well, you will know. You'll be keeping us honest. And thank you so
Yes.
much, Catherine.
Thank
Cole.
you.
Appreciate it. President Biden participated in a candle lighting to mark 1 year since the October 7th terrorist attacks in Israel. Biden was joined by a rabbi and the First Lady to light the Yahrzeit candle, which is used to pay respect to the dead in Judaism. To conclude the ceremony, they held a moment of silence for the victims of the war. That does it for today. We'll be back with another edition of America Decides tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. The Daily Report with John Dickerson starts right now.
Welcome to the Daily Report for the 7th of October, 2024. I'm John Dickerson. 1 year after the Hamas attack, Israelis commemorate and plea for the return